Fresh jobs numbers are out showing unemployment is rising again. With inflation already rising for 3 months in a row, that is the second shoe to drop in the stagflation hole. Last Friday, the Labor Department reported that U.S. employers added just 150,000 jobs in October, which is barely clearing population growth. That was down by half from the previous month, and it was the second worst showing since the pandemic. It bumped the unemployment rate to 3.9%, up from 3.7%, which is up almost a half point in just 4 months. As always in recent job reports, it's even worse on the inside. Over 1/3 of the new jobs were government workers, who of course don't produce anything, being parasites on productive workers who are forced to pay their salaries. Almost all the rest was education, which is pretty close to a government job, and healthcare, which is pretty ominous and again doesn't speak to future prosperity. By the way, almost 90% of those healthcare jobs were low-paid health and social assistance workers, so these are not neurosurgeons. What's left was literally 10,000 jobs out of an economy of 325 million people. Meanwhile, we actually lost jobs where people do produce things. So 35,000 jobs lost in manufacturing, another 10,000 in trade, transportation, and IT. As Peter Schiff pointed out, if you've got more people collecting government checks, but fewer people actually making stuff, that means inflation going forward. So more money chasing less stuff. Even more concerning, the report showed that wages are cooling fast, coming in at just half the pace of inflation. So workers are losing ground again. As in previous jobs reports, the number of people forced to take on second jobs soared once again, up almost 400,000 on the month to a record high of 8.5 million jobs. So many jobs, you need two. Meanwhile, the number of people in the labor force once again fell, suggesting that the pandemic era hit is actually getting worse 3 years after it ended. And finally, hours worked fell, which is the very last things that companies do before they start layoffs. Recall it was only a week ago that media was drooling over Joe Biden's blockbuster GDP numbers, and here we are. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained. This past year, the one thing keeping the recession at bay has been jobs numbers. A lot of that was a freebie from those COVID-era labor force dropouts, roughly 5 million in all, who either retired early or went on government benefits. That can last a lifetime. Adjusting for the dropouts would put unemployment between 6.5% to 7.5% right now. Note that even with that freebie, which forced employers to pay more for the remaining workers, paychecks were failing to keep up with inflation, with Americans losing $1.6 trillion in income since Biden took office. But now the slowing economy appears to have drained even that millions-deep reservoir of unfilled jobs. This all takes the heat off the Fed, who's been counting on a strangled economy to stop inflation instead of actually cutting the federal spending that's driving it. As Powell himself put it last week, we would need to see slower growth and softening in labor market conditions to fully restore price stability. Softening he got. Thing is, inflation is actually rising despite the softening economy, because Congress keeps rolling out yet more $100 billion spending bills, doing everything they can to cue up a stagflation that could last 4 years. A new episode of the Roundup podcast just went live. Check it out at petersanons.com. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.